What's going on, guys? Austin here, and in this video, we are going to be taking a look at all the A grades that I'm giving to the NFL draft participants, if you say. So, of all the teams that drafted, we've gone through all the Fs, the Ds, the Cs, and the Bs, and now only a few A teams remain. Also, Lions, like senior executive personnel, whatever, assistant, John Dorsey, former GM of the Kansas City Chiefs and then the Cleveland Browns, who is now working for the Lions. Excellent general manager. Potentially could be the best in the league if he got another job. Anyway, so we've got the Minnesota Vikings at my lowest grade of all the A's. They had 10 total picks, 4 in the top 100, and their draft as far as personnel and their fit with the team was very good. Lewis Cine, safety out of Georgia, a lot of people were saying could be the best safety in the draft. He's a little bit faster and quicker than Kyle Hamilton, who's bigger with maybe slightly better instincts, but that's just a preference thing. And they got him all the way down at 32. At 42, Andrew Booth Jr., again, helping out the secondary. He was a guy that I had going to Tampa Bay at 26, I think, maybe. I don't remember. But I had him going to Tampa Bay in the first round. So, getting him at 42, very good pick right here. Going offensive line, they need the offensive line help with Ed Ingram, Brian Asamoah, out of Oklahoma, another Oklahoma defensive player. It was weird how many they had. Him coming in at 66 was good value. I love those first two picks. And Ed Ingram, if he can end up being a good player for them, just as long as he starts, beats out some of the bums that they have on that offensive line, he can end up doing really well. Several picks later, the Minnesota Vikings ended up grabbing Jalen Nailor, the wide receiver out of Michigan State, who I thought was a really good wide receiver. He was pretty much their only wide receiver. And a few things led to him falling in the draft, being a lower round pick. Number one, he was the only wide receiver, so he seriously got heavy coverage. Number two was that they were a run-heavy team. And number three was not only were they a run-heavy team, but their running back played so fantastic that the Spartans needed to pass less and less as the season progressed. I believe that Kenneth Walker really only had like one bad game. I think it was against Ohio State. And so Jalen Nailor really kind of got put up on the sideline. So he could seriously end up being a guy that comes out, surprises, wow, the Vikings have an excellent number 3 wide receiver, and absolute high end. One day, as Adam Thielen gets older, he might be able to take that place. I'm not sure about that. It seems a little high, but it's really good value for pick 191. 10 overall picks. This leads to this being, an A- draft. Houston Texans also get an A- draft. I said that they could very well end up running this draft because I believe they had 7 picks in the top 100 when they started this draft process. Now, I don't know why they traded a lot of these picks. I remember they didn't even start with pick 15. They had pick 13. I don't know exactly what all trades went down, but just take a look at these numbers right here. They grabbed Derek Stingley, who there was a few concerns about him. But I mean, the LSU pedigree, he's got it going. He has played in some very big games. And so overall, it's a good choice. I just don't know if it's the best choice at 3. Kenyon Green, the interior offensive lineman, who for me, it was kind of between him and Zion Johnson as far as guards, pretty much. But I ended up going Zion Johnson just a little bit better, but not by much. And then Jalen Petrie, the defensive back out of Baylor, he was a guy who I could have seen going at 32 to the Lions if they had decided to stay there. Overall, he's a very versatile back, not quite as versatile as Daxton Hill from Michigan, but he's a very good player in all rights. John Mechie out of Alabama, who he kind of has the same thing going on for him that not quite to the same level. But he's very similar to Jalen Nailor in this respect, where they both play on run heavy teams. He didn't have quite the running back on his team, but he was the only wide receiver, always got the coverage. And then Christian Harris, the linebacker out of Alabama, I don't really remember much about him, don't know much about him, but he's a linebacker from Alabama, so he's going to be ready to play as soon as he steps into the league. 9 total picks, meaning that only 4 were outside the top 100. Gives this a very high-rated draft. Plus, they got some future draft picks with all their trades. So, again, the total value here is really good. It's just there was a few teams that graded out higher. Another A-, we've got the Green Bay Packers, who hit it out of the park with their first 4 picks. When you have 4 top 100 picks as a team that has the best overall record in the league, it's very, very difficult to get that much better, and they did. Quay Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia, immediately addresses a need. I would have rather had Nakobe Dean, but there was that whole concern about, him wanting to rehab his pec injury instead of getting surgery on it. Don't really know what that's about because, you can always evaluate him when you draft him and then say, oh, you actually do need surgery. And then, oh no, he only misses, 4 games instead of playing all 17. He only plays, 13. It's a really weird situation right there. But their biggest weakness, number 1 was run defense, and number 2 was secondary options at, pass catchers. And so, their first 3 picks immediately addresses that. They had Devontae Wyatt, the defensive tackle out of Georgia, plus Quay Walker, who will immediately day one make their run defense better. They lost Darius Smith, but they're going to replace him with Rashawn Gary, who had an excellent postseason and is really just starting to come into his own. So now they have a front 7 that includes Quay Walker, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, and Devontae Wyatt, plus any of the starters who they still have. Not Blake Martinez. Who's the guy that they still have? I can't even think of his name. The linebacker that they re-signed, Devondre Campbell, excellent tackling linebacker. Him and Quay Walker paired up. It's going to be a great duo. I wouldn't be surprised if they even tried to go for somewhat of a 3-down lineman and 2 linebacker set and play a lot of DBs because they're pretty good at DB. With Stokes and Savage and the best one of them all. Geez, this is getting awful. The more of these videos that I do, the more names I'm forgetting. Yeah, they have a really great secondary. The Packers defense is going to be surprisingly good. For any of you guys that play fantasy out there, I'm calling it right now. They are going to have a top 10 defense. Like book it, put it on paper, right? In ink, top 10 defense, Green Bay Packers. They went Christian Watson, the wide receiver from North Dakota State, who he had all the measurables that you'd want. It's just he played for a smaller school, so you get kind of nervous about it, but that didn't stop quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Carson Wentz from getting drafted incredibly high. So why should it stop wide receivers as long as they are just as athletic and can play the game of football? Sean Ryan, offensive tackle out of UCLA, one of the best late-round offensive tackles. He had an incredibly high, run block win rate, pass block win rate. And then, so 4 top 100 picks, 11 total picks. They had another great offensive lineman that were drafted. Overall, excellent draft by the Green Bay Packers. It's just the shape and the dynamic of their team moving forward is absolutely going to change because your number 1 wide receiver went from Devontae Adams to now it's Christian Watson. And so they're going to have to rely heavily on the run game. And Aaron Rodgers is going to have to start distributing the ball more. He distributes touchdowns, but he doesn't give a lot of receivers a lot of 50-50 chances. He doesn't give a lot of receivers a lot of opportunities to make plays. It's just, I'm gonna force the ball to Devontae Adams, and then if somebody else is open. And so he's gonna have to change, at the age of 38 or 39 or however old he is, which is gonna be incredibly fascinating. And the Green Bay Packers are incredibly well set up to compete next year. Another A-, we have the Baltimore Ravens, who overall, they very similar to the Green Bay Packers in the regard that they got rid of their number one wide receiver. Now, obviously, Devontae Adams is worth, like 2 Marquise Browns, but when Marquise Brown is your only wide receiver, I mean, the Ravens have a worse receiver room than the Packers do now, even without Christian Watson on the Packers. But it's not for a loss, right? Kyle Hamilton, who a lot of people said there's the best safety in the draft, fell to you at 14. You got incredibly lucky. Tyler Linderbaum, best center in the draft, fell to you at 25. Elite draft pick. David Ojabo, who was probably going to be a top 25 draft pick, fell to you at 45. Obviously, he's got the Achilles, but I mean, injuries aren't what they used to be. Players are coming back. I mean, Cam Akers came back from an Achilles injury in 5 months, for goodness sakes. That's incredible. Travis Jones, the defensive tackle out of UConn, who is just going to add to that defensive line. And then Isaiah Likely, the tight end from Coastal Carolina, was my favorite pick out of tight end. He's got a lot of things going for him. He started out his career at wide receiver. He's got the hands. Some people don't quite believe in his size. I think absolute perfect upside. He could end up being a guy like a Kyle Pitts where, he's 6'4", 240 pounds, and he's got really good hands, maybe a little bit slower of a version. So, going a little bit old school, you could go, obviously not all time because the longevity factor is a little bit different, but you could play a very similar style to a Jimmy Graham or a Delaney Walker. The Baltimore Ravens had 11 total picks, and their first 3 picks, they had very good players fall to them. Didn't draft up, didn't trade up to draft these guys. They traded away Marquise Brown and a third for pick 23, which, I mean, it is what it is. And they traded pick 23. They traded back, two spots, and they still got Tyler Linderbaum, which is overall a good pick. It's just, I mean, this team is going to be so weird having, their number one target be Mark Andrews, and then he'll probably get 1,300 yards, and then their next guy might not get half of that. It's going to be really weird. But I mean, Lamar is going to do what he always does. As long as he stays healthy, they're going to win games. Then I believe my only solid A is the Philadelphia Eagles. Now they had 5 total picks, and with their first 3 picks, they were all in the top 100. They traded a lot of their picks this year for future draft picks. They kind of robbed the Saints earlier in the offseason, then they did it again during the draft when the Saints wanted to trade up and draft Penning. They traded for wide receiver A.J. Brown with one of their first-round picks, which is an elite trade, one of their first and third-round picks. So at 13, you've got Jordan Davis, who is a 6'6", 4'5", defensive tackle. As long as he stays in a mild amount of good shape, he's going to end up being a serious problem in the NFL. Cam Jurgens is center out of Nebraska. It's a great offensive line building pick right there, because as long as, right now they don't have weaknesses at tight end or wide receiver, and their running backs have solid depth. Miles Sanders, as long as he stays healthy, is very good. Their defense overall now, pretty decent. Bolstering the offensive line is important for young quarterbacks. And then grabbing Nakobe Dean at 83. Earlier, I think I said he was available. I think he got taken at 87. I was mistaken. He was available at 83. And Nakobe Dean, who could end up being the best run defender in this draft, of the top linebackers who, Quay Walker, Devin Lloyd, Nakobe Dean, he's probably the best run blocker, or run defender rather. And this defensive front seven just got immediately better. Jalen Hurts just got better because now Devonta Smith is your number 2. A.J. Brown is your number 1. Philadelphia Eagles absolutely knocked this draft out of the park. The only reason they are not number 1 is because, they pretty much punted on this year for a lot of picks, pushed a lot of picks, traded for future picks, and because the New York Football Jets had an absolute monster of a draft. They had 7 total picks, all right? All of them came within the top 117, right? So not only did they have 7 picks, which is pretty good, but none of them came after pick 117, meaning that, I like to say the top 100 is where you really get your starters. Well, as soon as you go past that, it's like, maybe like a coin flip kind of guy, but like they had 3 guys go between 101 and 117, which is incredible. Number 1, you got Ahmad Gardner in the first round, who is, I think he's going to end up being Patrick Peterson. And I mean, how much could you really say about that? If you draft Patrick Peterson, you have the best cornerback of the generation, the bridge from Darrelle Revis to Jalen Ramsey. You have the guy that dominated the league for 10 years in between that span, right? Garrett Wilson, who I wasn't as high on Garrett Wilson, but I believe he is the most pro ready today in the draft. Jermaine Johnson, who could easily end up being the most versatile and valuable edge rusher in this draft for the reason of he can really play a version of a middle linebacker that likes to rush the passer. My comp for him was Micah Parsons. Last year he had 70 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery. I don't know if he had any picks or not, but I mean, that's just crazy production. Normally you don't get 70 tackles and 11 sacks, let alone the 17 and a half tackles for loss. Unbelievable value when you have 4 picks in the top 36, and then your next 3 are between 101 and 117. You probably got 4 starters on day 1 and 2 in those top 36. And then those last 3 picks, you probably either got starters or very good depth players. Breece Hall, probably the best running back in the draft, definitely the most versatile. He can play big, he can play fast, he can really do whatever you need to do there. He's got the hands, and adding him, pushing Michael Carter down the depth chart is actually a great thing, because when you have a running back tandem, that ends up working a lot better for teams who are looking to just slowly build, because eventually you can choose one of them and then give him another backup. Then you have 2 more then you choose one, give him another backup. It's something that the Lions could easily do. It's something that I envision the Packers keep on doing, between Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones. It shows Aaron Jones. They gave him A.J. Dillon. In the future, they're going to choose between A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones and give him a backup, give the next guy a backup. I think that's what the Broncos are doing. I think that's what the Chargers are doing. That's what the Lions should do. That's what the Jets are doing now. And then tight end, Jeremy Ruckert at 101. He's a really interesting pick to me, because I think he could end up being potentially the second best tight end in the draft, maybe the best if everything works out. But the reason is because he was on an Ohio State team that had Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I hope I'm saying that name right. Who are just dominating all of the targets. And, last year, the previous season, Trey Sermon was on the team. Those guys were still on the team. And it's like Jameson Williams was also on that team, and he couldn't even get on the field. So, maybe when Jeremy gets to the league, it's like, oh, hey, by the way, like, I'm actually really good. I just never got the targets because those guys were just slightly better. So now you're bringing in guys like a Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, and Garrett Wilson, which, all things considered, very good wide receiver room. Jeremy Ruckert and CJ Uzomah, very good tight end room overall. Not elite players, but a very good depth of the tight ends. You still have your left tackle, Mekhi Becton, and you have the guy that you drafted the next year, Elijah Vera Tucker, who is a very good guard. And so this offense looks set up to do great things as long as the development of Zach Wilson continues. I really wasn't high on him. I actually thought that he had the highest bust factor. But what the Jets have done is they have put him in a situation that similar that the Rams put Jared Goff in so many years ago. It's like, hey, you might not be as good as what your stats show, but we're just literally not going to let you fail. Like you just have too much here to fail. And that can easily turn a player from a bust into average. It can turn an average player into a great player. And that will permanently affect their development, because the more confidence that you build and the more reps that you have of winning football, the more winning football that you can then produce later on. And so I think between Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Jeremy Ruckert, and the guys that they put on the roster last year, I think they're saving a pick that I really didn't like in Zach Wilson. Their defense is definitely going to take a step up. I think they're on the last year of the CJ Mosley deal, which it is what it is. I mean, he played like 13 snaps for them over like 3 years, getting $150 million. But this year, you could definitely see Jermaine Johnson, Ahmad Gardner, and CJ Mosley do very well, all throughout the defense. You still have Quinn Williams on the defensive line at tackle, who's really good. Overall, I think the Jets by far had the best draft. The only reason I didn't give them a second plus is because I only had 7 picks. If they would have had, like 9, 10 with, a lot of picks in between 36 and 101, this could end up being the best draft since the 2017 Saints, which is one of the greatest drafts of all time. So there's my synopsis. Overall, all 32 teams. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel about your team. Too high, too low. Who's your favorite pick, and who should I look out for coming up in the future?